Black woman missed a job interview to help a man with a broken car, not knowing who he was. The rain was falling in sheets when Daniel Reeves placed his jacket over the shoulders of the crying woman sitting on the wet pavement outside his building. She looked up, confusion cutting through her tears, and their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face slowly, like dawn breaking after the longest night. You're the man from the road," she whispered, "with the broken car." Daniel Reeves, billionaire CEO of Harlow Industries, knelt down on the wet concrete beside Janet Price, the woman who'd missed her job interview to help a stranger. "Yes," he said gently, "and you're Janet Price, who sacrificed everything to help me when no one else would." "I don't understand. How do you know my name?" "Because I own this building, and you were supposed to interview for a position in my company." He paused, his voice thick with something that sounded like wonder. "You didn't miss your opportunity, Janet. You earned something bigger. But to understand how a missed interview became a life-changing moment, how a stranded motorist became a benefactor, how a single act of compassion rewrote 2 lives completely, you have to go back 4 hours, back to when Janet Price woke up in her tiny apartment with one prayer on her lips and desperation in her heart. Back to the moment she had to choose between her future and a stranger's need. Back to the morning that changed everything. Before we dive deeper, I want to ask you where you're watching from. Drop a comment and tell me where you are and what time it is. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the stories we share aren't just about one person's journey. They're about the choices we all face every single day, the choice between convenience and compassion, between self-preservation and service, between looking away and stopping to help. Now let me take you back to where Janet's day really began. The alarm screamed at 6:30 on Monday morning, cutting through the thin walls of the apartment like a knife. Janet Price silenced it immediately, her heart already racing with the anxiety that had kept her up most of the night. Today was the day. The interview at Harlow Industries, her last real chance. She lay in the narrow bed for exactly 30 seconds, allowing herself that brief moment of stillness before the day's demands crashed over her. Then she sat up, careful not to make noise. Her mother, Agnes, was sleeping in the next room, and sleep was precious for her these days, one of the few times she wasn't in pain. Janet's feet touched the cold linoleum floor. The apartment was freezing. It was early November, and their building's heating system was more decorative than functional, but at least they had electricity this week. The power company had reconnected it after Janet had scraped together the reconnection fee, plus a promise to pay the outstanding balance within 30 days. 30 days. Another deadline hanging over her head like a sword. She moved quietly through the apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen-living room combination that felt claustrophobic even when you were alone. This was what they could afford now, after losing the house, after her mother's medical bills started mounting, after Janet lost her job at the hospital when budget cuts eliminated her position. 6 months ago, they'd been stable. Not wealthy, but stable. Janet had been an administrative coordinator at City General Hospital, making enough to cover rent, utilities, groceries, and her mother's medications. They weren't saving much, but they weren't drowning either. Then Agnes's diabetes worsened, complications that required specialized treatment, medications that insurance only partially covered, hospital stays that came with bills that read like mortgage payments. Then Janet's position was eliminated. Restructuring, they called it. "We're so sorry," they said. "You've been wonderful, but we have to make difficult choices." Difficult choices. Janet had been making difficult choices every day since. Which bill to pay, which meal to skip, whether to buy her mother's medication or pay the electricity bill. For 6 months, she'd been applying for jobs. 47 applications, 47 rejections or non-responses. Either she was overqualified, or she'd been unemployed too long, or the positions had been filled, or there were just so many other candidates. Until last week, when she'd received the call from Harlow Industries. They wanted to interview her for an administrative assistant position. The pay was modest, but steady. The benefits included health insurance that would cover her mother's pre-existing conditions. It was a lifeline, the only one left. Janet showered quickly in lukewarm water. They kept the water heater on the lowest setting to save money. She dried off and stared at her reflection in the foggy mirror. 32 years old, but she looked older. Stress and worry had carved lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You're going to get this job. You're going to take care of Mom. You're going to be okay." The words felt hollow, but she needed to say them anyway. In her bedroom, Janet pulled out the outfit she'd prepared the night before. A black pantsuit she'd bought from a thrift store and had tailored to fit with the last of her savings. A white blouse that she'd ironed 3 times to make sure it was perfect. Black heels that pinched her toes but looked professional. She dressed carefully, each piece of clothing a piece of armor. By the time she was done, she looked like someone who belonged in a corporate office, someone competent and reliable, someone worth hiring. She applied minimal makeup, couldn't afford to replace what she had, so she used it sparingly. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Professional, presentable, hopefully employable. On her small desk sat her printed resume and a folder with references, work samples, and her meticulously researched notes about Harlow Industries. She'd spent hours learning about the company, a mid-sized tech manufacturing firm that had grown steadily over the past decade. They made components for larger tech companies, specialized parts that required precision and reliability. The CEO was Daniel Reeves, a self-made billionaire who'd started the company in his 20s and built it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Janet had read every article she could find about him. By all accounts, he was brilliant but demanding, private to the point of reclusiveness, not someone who suffered fools or mediocrity. Janet hoped she could impress him, or at least whoever would be conducting the interview. She needed this so badly it physically hurt. At 7 o'clock, she heard movement from her mother's room. Agnes emerged slowly, using her walker, her face drawn with the pain that was her constant companion these days. "Morning, baby," Agnes said, her voice warm despite the pain. "Today's the big day." "Morning, Mum." Janet helped her mother settle into the kitchen chair. "Let me make you breakfast." "You don't have time." "I'm leaving early. I have time." Janet made oatmeal cheap, filling, and gentle on her mother's stomach. She prepared Agnes's medications, laying them out in the pill organizer with careful precision. Too much of one could cause problems. Too little of another could trigger a medical crisis. They ate together in the small kitchen, the silence comfortable. Agnes watched her daughter with eyes that held both pride and sorrow. "You look beautiful, Janet," Agnes said softly. "Professional and capable. They'd be lucky to have you. I hope they see it that way." "They will. I feel it in my bones. Today is going to change everything for us." Janet wanted to believe her. Agnes had always had intuitions about things, feelings that often proved correct. But Janet had learned not to hope too hard. Disappointment hurt less when you didn't expect success. "I should go," Janet said, checking the time. "The bus comes at 7:30, and I need to transfer twice. The interview is at 9, and I want to be early. You go. I'll be fine here. I've got my shows to watch, and my knitting." Agnes reached across the table and squeezed Janet's hand. "I'm praying for you, baby. God's going to take care of this." "I hope so, Mom." Janet kissed her mother's forehead, grabbed her folder and purse, and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back. "I love you, Mom. I love you too. Now go get that job." Outside, the November morning was gray and cold. The weather forecast had called for rain later, but for now, the sky just threatened. Janet walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop, her heels clicking on the pavement, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. At the bus stop, she stood with 5 other people, all of them looking tired, all of them heading to jobs or interviews or obligations that started too early and paid too little. The bus arrived 10 minutes late, already crowded. Janet squeezed into a seat near the back and clutched her folder to her chest. Through the window, she watched the city wake up, the wealthy neighborhoods with their perfect lawns and expensive cars, the commercial districts with their gleaming buildings, the industrial areas where people like her worked hard for modest wages. Somewhere in one of those gleaming buildings, her future waited. She just had to get there. The first transfer went smoothly. The second bus was on time. Janet checked her phone obsessively. 8:15, 8:20, 8:30. She'd arrive at Harlow Industries by 8:45, 15 minutes early. Perfect. Everything was going according to plan, until it wasn't. Across the city, in a penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building, Daniel Reeves woke without an alarm, at 6 a.m. exactly. His internal clock was precise, trained by years of waking early to maximize productive hours. He lay in the California king bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, running through the day's agenda in his mind. Board meeting at 9:30, merger presentation at 11. Conference calls with the West Coast office in the afternoon, dinner with potential investors in the evening. A full day, a successful day, if everything went according to plan. Daniel rose and moved through his morning routine with military efficiency. Shower, shave. Expensive suit laid out by his housekeeper the night before, charcoal gray, tailored perfectly to his 6-foot frame. Italian leather shoes. Watch that cost more than most people's monthly salary. By 6:45, he was dressed and eating a breakfast his chef had prepared and left in the warming drawer. Egg white omelette, whole grain toast, black coffee, efficient fuel for an efficient day. The penthouse was silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant sounds of the city waking below. Daniel lived alone. Had lived alone for years. It was simpler that way. Relationships were complicated, demanded time and emotional energy that he'd rather invest in his company. His company, Harlow Industries, built from nothing when he was 25 years old with a business plan, a loan he could barely afford, and a determination that bordered on obsession. Daniel had grown up poor. Not poverty line poor, but the kind of poor where you wore clothes until they fell apart, where you never went to restaurants, where Christmas presents were practical necessities rather than wants. His mother, Eleanor, had raised him alone after his father left when Daniel was 3. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and housed, sacrificing everything for her son. Daniel had watched her work herself to exhaustion, watched her cry over bills she couldn't pay, watched her smile at him and pretend everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. He'd promised himself 2 things. He'd make enough money that his mother would never struggle again, and he'd never let himself become vulnerable the way she had been. Love made you weak. Connection made you dependent. He'd seen what happened when you tied your well-being to another person. So he'd focused on success instead. Studied hard, won scholarships, got into a good business school, started his company with nothing but borrowed capital and a vision. And he'd succeeded beyond his wildest projections. Harlow Industries now employed over 500 people, generated over $200 million in annual revenue, and held patents on technology that major tech companies couldn't function without. And Daniel had done it all alone. No partner, no spouse. No one to share the success with except his mother, who now lived comfortably in a house he'd bought her, with all her medical needs covered, and then some. He'd achieved everything he'd set out to achieve. So why did it feel so empty? Daniel pushed the thought away. He didn't have time for existential crises. He had a company to run. At 7:15, his phone buzzed. Text from his driver, "Sick today, can't make it. Sorry for short notice." Daniel frowned. Robert had been his driver for 3 years and rarely called out. This was inconvenient, but not catastrophic. He'd drive himself. Actually, that might be nice. Daniel rarely drove anymore, and he had a vintage car he'd been restoring that could use some road time. A 1967 Mustang he'd bought as a project, something to do with his hands on the rare evenings when work didn't consume every moment. Decision made. Daniel grabbed the keys to the Mustang from the hook in his garage and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred to life. He'd just had the mechanic tune it up last week. Perfect. At 7:30, Daniel pulled out of the secure parking garage and into Monday morning traffic. The drive to Harlow Industries would take about 40 minutes, putting him there by 8 to 10. Plenty of time before the board meeting. The sky was gray, threatening rain, but Daniel barely noticed. He was mentally reviewing the merger presentation, making sure he had all his talking points memorized. This merger was crucial. It would expand Harlow Industries into international markets and double their revenue within 5 years. Everything was going according to plan, until it wasn't. Daniel was on the highway, maintaining steady speed in the middle lane, when the first warning light appeared on the dashboard. Red, battery. He frowned. That was odd. He'd just had the car serviced. Then the engine sputtered. The radio died. The dashboard lights flickered. The power steering became suddenly heavy. No, Daniel muttered, guiding the car toward the shoulder as it lost power. No, no, no. The Mustang coasted to a stop on the side of the highway, rain beginning to fall in earnest now. Daniel sat there for a moment, disbelief warring with frustration. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not when he had the most important meeting of the quarter in an hour. He tried to restart the engine. Nothing. The battery was completely dead. Daniel pulled out his phone to call for roadside assistance. 3% battery. His charger was in his regular car, and he'd forgotten to grab it. Perfect, he said to the empty car. Just perfect. He got out into the rain, immediately soaked despite his expensive suit, popped the hood, looked at the engine with the confidence of someone who'd watched YouTube videos but had never actually fixed anything mechanical. The battery connection was loose, corroded, obviously the problem. If he could just tighten it, clean the corrosion, he might be able to get enough power to start the engine. But he had no tools, no gloves, no light to see properly in the shadow of the hood. Daniel looked up at the highway. Cars whizzed past, spraying water. Morning rush hour in full swing. Surely someone would stop to help. 30 seconds passed. A minute. 5 minutes. Car after car swerved around him. Some honked angrily, as if his breakdown was a personal inconvenience to them. A few slowed down, drivers and passengers staring at him curiously through rain-streaked windows, then accelerating away once they'd satisfied their curiosity. Daniel stood there in his $1,000 suit, rain plastering his hair to his head, and experienced something he hadn't felt in years: helplessness. He was a billionaire. He could buy and sell most of the people driving past him, but right now, stranded on this highway, he was just another problem people wanted to avoid. It was humbling. It was infuriating. It was lonely. 10 minutes passed. Daniel's phone died. He was going to be late for the board meeting. The merger presentation was in jeopardy, and he was standing in the rain, soaking wet, completely alone. He tried waving at passing cars. Most ignored him. A few actually accelerated, apparently afraid he might be dangerous. A Mercedes slowed down. Daniel's hopes rose. The window rolled down slightly, and a woman's voice called out, "Are you okay? My car broke down. Do you have any tools? Or a phone charger?" The woman looked at him like he'd asked her to donate a kidney. "Sorry, I'm late for work." The window rolled up. The Mercedes drove away. Daniel laughed bitterly. Of course. More time passed. The rain intensified. Daniel's fingers were numb. His shirt was transparent with water. His Italian leather shoes were ruined. And no one stopped. No one cared. He was invisible. Just another stranded motorist. Another problem. Another inconvenience in other people's busy lives. Daniel thought about his mother. About all the times she'd struggled and people had looked away. About how wealth and success were supposed to protect you from moments like this. But they didn't. Not really. Because at the end of the day, you were still just a person who needed help. And most people couldn't be bothered. Daniel was about to give up, to just wait for his phone to magically revive itself, or for a police car to eventually notice him, when a bus pulled up at the stop across the highway. A woman got off, looked around, getting her bearings, then looked across the highway and saw him standing by his broken-down car. She hesitated. Daniel could see it even from that distance. She checked her watch, looked down the road in the direction she needed to go, looked back at him. Then she crossed the highway, jogging through traffic, and approached him through the rain. "Sir," she called out, "are you okay? Do you need help?" Daniel stared at her. She was the first person in 25 minutes to actually stop, to actually care. "My car broke down," he said, his voice rough. "I'm trying to fix it, but I don't have tools or light." "I don't know much about cars," the woman admitted. She was younger than him, maybe early 30s, wearing a business suit that was getting soaked in the rain. "But let me see what I can do." "Don't you have somewhere to be?" Daniel asked, noticing her professional attire. "I do," she said simply, "but you need help right now." And just like that, Janet Price made the choice that would change both their lives forever. Have you ever had to choose between something important to you and helping someone else? Drop a comment and tell me about it. Because that's the choice Janet made in this moment, her future versus a stranger's present. If you're already invested in where this is going, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Janet set down her folder carefully on a relatively dry patch of ground under the hood and pulled out her phone. "I can use the flashlight," she offered, "so you can see what you're doing." Daniel looked at this woman, this complete stranger who'd gotten off her bus, crossed a highway, and was now offering to help him, and felt something shift in his chest. Gratitude, surprise, something else he couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said. "I'm Daniel." "Janet," she smiled, despite the rain running down her face. "Let's see if we can get your car running." Daniel bent over the engine, and Janet held her phone flashlight steady so he could see. The light was bright enough that he could finally examine the battery connection properly. "The connection is corroded and loose," he explained, more to himself than to her. "If I can clean it and tighten it, the battery might have enough charge to start." "What do you need?" "Something to scrape off the corrosion, and something to protect my hands when I tighten it. The metal is hot." Janet looked around. Then she did something that made Daniel's throat tighten. She unwrapped the scarf from her neck, a simple blue scarf that was probably the warmest thing she was wearing, and handed it to him. "Use this for your hands." "I can't take your scarf. It's just a scarf. You need it more than I do right now." Daniel took it, the fabric soft in his hands, still warm from her body heat. He wrapped it around his palm and carefully gripped the hot pipe that was in the way, moving it aside. Janet held the light steady, her phone battery draining with each passing minute. She didn't complain, didn't check the time, just stood there in the rain, holding the light, occasionally adjusting her position when Daniel needed a different angle. "Do you live around here?" Daniel asked, making conversation as he worked. "About 30 minutes away. I was on my way to a job interview." His hands stilled. "A job interview? And you stopped to help me?" "You needed help." She said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. "But your interview? It's at 9. I left early. I should still make it." "Should. Not will. Should." Daniel worked faster, guilt mixing with gratitude. This woman had sacrificed her time, possibly her opportunity to help him. A stranger, someone who could do nothing for her. He found a loose piece of metal in the car and used it to scrape the corrosion from the battery terminals. It was crude, but it worked. Then he used Janet's scarf to grip the connection and tighten it as much as he could with his bare hands. "Okay," he said. "Let's see if this works." He climbed into the driver's seat. Janet stood near the open door, still holding her phone light even though he didn't need it anymore. Her battery was down to 15%. Daniel turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught. Relief washed over him so intensely he nearly laughed. It worked. It actually worked. Janet's face broke into a brilliant smile. "That's great." Daniel got out of the car, and before he could think better of it, he pulled her into a brief, grateful hug. She was soaked and cold, and he was soaked and cold, but neither of them seemed to care. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just saved my morning." "I'm glad I could help." Janet checked her phone. Her smile faltered. "Oh no." "What?" "My battery died from the flashlight." She looked up at him, concern flickering across her face. "What time is it?" Daniel checked his watch. 8:50. 8:50, he said. All the color drained from Janet's face. No. My interview is at 9. I was supposed to be there by now. I don't even know exactly where the building is, and my phone is dead, so I can't use the GPS. Where's your interview? Harlow Industries. Do you know it? Daniel went very still. Yes, I know it. How far is it from here? 20 minutes. Maybe 25, with traffic. Janet's face crumpled. She was going to cry, he realized. This woman who'd stopped to help him, who'd used her phone battery and her scarf and her time, was going to be late for her interview because of him. I'll drive you, Daniel said immediately. Get in. I'll get you there as fast as I can. You don't have to. Janet, you stopped to help me. Let me help you, please. She hesitated only a second, then nodded. She grabbed her folder from under the hood and climbed into the passenger seat. Daniel got behind the wheel, and they pulled back into traffic. He drove faster than was probably wise, weaving through lanes, pushing the Mustang's engine. Janet sat beside him, wringing her hands, stress radiating from her in waves. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said. "If I hadn't broken down, you'd be on time. It's not your fault your car broke down. But you stopped to help me, and now you're going to be late because of it." "I made the choice to stop," Janet said quietly. "I knew it might make me late, but I couldn't just drive past you. I couldn't." She trailed off, but Daniel understood. She couldn't be the kind of person who looked away from someone struggling, even when it cost her, even when it might cost her everything. They drove in tense silence, Daniel pushing the car as fast as he dared. At 9:15, they pulled up outside Harlow Industries. Janet looked at the building, sleek, modern, intimidating, and took a deep breath. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "I hope your day gets better from here." "Wait." Daniel reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a business card. "Take this. If there's any problem with your interview because you were late, have them call me. I'll explain what happened." Janet took the card, glanced at it briefly, then tucked it into her folder. "Thank you, Daniel. It was nice meeting you, even under the circumstances." "It was nice meeting you too. Good luck in there." She gave him one last smile, brave despite her obvious fear, and hurried toward the building. Daniel sat in his car and watched her go. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 9:17. He was late for the board meeting too, but somehow it didn't seem as important as it had an hour ago. That woman had stopped for him, had helped him, had sacrificed her own opportunity without hesitation or expectation of reward. When was the last time someone had done that for him? When was the last time anyone had seen him as just another person who needed help, rather than Daniel Reeves, CEO, billionaire, someone who could offer them something in return? He couldn't remember. Daniel pulled into the executive parking garage and headed inside, his suit still damp, his hair a mess. He'd have to change before the board meeting. But his mind kept returning to Janet, to her kindness, to the way she'd held that phone light steady even as her battery died, to the smile she'd given him despite knowing she was going to be late. Most people drove past. She stopped. That meant something. He just didn't know what, yet. Janet ran through the rain from the car to the entrance of Harlow Industries, her heels splashing through puddles, her suit soaked through, her carefully styled hair falling loose from its bun. She burst through the glass doors into the lobby and stopped, trying to catch her breath. The lobby was stunning. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, modern art on the walls. Everything gleaming and expensive and intimidating. Janet felt like she'd tracked mud into a palace. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk, her expression cool and professional. Her nameplate read, Claire Morrison. She looked up as Janet approached, and her eyes flickered over Janet's disheveled appearance with barely concealed judgment. "Can I help you?" Claire's tone suggested that helping was the last thing she wanted to do. "Yes, I'm here for an interview. 9 o'clock, administrative assistant position." Janet tried to smooth her wet hair, acutely aware of how she must look. "My name is Janet Price." Claire's expression didn't change, but something hardened in her eyes. "Miss Price, your interview slot was at 9. It's now 9:22. "I know. I'm so sorry. There was an emergency on the way here. A man's car broke down, and I stopped to help him, and my phone died, and we have protocols, Miss Price." Claire's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Interview times are scheduled for a reason. The panel has moved on to the next candidate." Janet's heart dropped into her stomach. "Please, I understand I'm late, but if I could just explain to them what happened. The panel isn't seeing you today. I'm sorry, but those are the rules. Please." Janet heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. "I really need this job. My mother is sick. We're about to lose our apartment. I wouldn't have been late except I stopped to help someone who was stranded. And I..." "Miss Price." Claire cut her off, and now there was something almost cruel in her professional demeanor. "I understand you have circumstances, but so does everyone. The difference is that other candidates managed to arrive on time. Perhaps if you'd prioritized your interview over helping a stranger, you wouldn't be in this position." The words hit Janet like a slap. The implication was clear. This was her fault. She'd made a bad choice. She'd chosen wrong. "Is there anyone else I can speak to?" Janet asked, her voice trembling now. "A supervisor? HR?" HR made the decision. There are no exceptions. Claire turned back to her computer screen, dismissing Janet without another word. "Thank you for your interest in Harlow Industries." Janet stood there for a moment, frozen. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. The security guard, an older black man with kind eyes, whose name tag read Marcus, was watching the exchange with sympathy evident on his face. But he couldn't help her, couldn't override the receptionist's decision, could only watch as another black woman got turned away from opportunity. Janet turned and walked toward the exit on legs that felt numb. She pushed through the glass doors back into the rain, and the grey sky felt appropriate for the moment. Everything grey, everything cold, everything hopeless. She walked about 20 feet from the entrance and then simply stopped. Her legs wouldn't carry her any further. She sat down on the wet pavement, right there on the sidewalk, her back against the building's exterior wall. Her expensive folder, carefully prepared, meticulously organized, sat beside her in a puddle. She didn't even care. And then she started to cry. Not delicate tears, not quiet sadness, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere in her chest where she'd been holding everything together for 6 months. The disappointment, the fear, the exhaustion of trying so hard and failing anyway, the desperation of watching her mother suffer because Janet couldn't afford the medications that would help, the humiliation of begging for a chance and being turned away. "I did the right thing," she whispered between sobs. "I helped him. I did what Mom always taught me. Why did it cost me everything?" People walked past her, employees arriving for work, delivery people, visitors. Some glanced at her curiously. Most pretended not to see her at all. She was invisible. Just another struggling black woman in a city full of them. Just another casualty of a system that valued punctuality over compassion, convenience over character. "I should have kept going," Janet said to no one. "I should have been selfish, should have thought about myself." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. She couldn't have driven past that man. It wasn't in her nature. Her mother had raised her to help people who were struggling, to see others' humanity, even when it was inconvenient. "Do the right thing, baby," Agnes always said. "Even when it costs you, especially when it costs you, because that's when it matters most." Well, Janet had done the right thing, and it had cost her the last chance to save her family. She sat there in the rain, crying on the pavement outside a building full of people who decided she didn't deserve an opportunity, and wondered how she was going to tell her mother that there was no more hope. How much more could they lose before there was nothing left? Inside the building, 28 floors up, Daniel Reeves was walking out of the executive locker room in a fresh suit, his hair dried and combed, looking every inch the successful CEO again. He headed toward the conference room where the board meeting was about to start, but something made him pause at the window. He looked down at the street below and saw her, Janet, sitting on the wet pavement, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Daniel's breath caught. Why was she still there? Why wasn't she in her interview? Unless, understanding crashed over him, she'd been turned away, because she was late, because she'd stopped to help him. "No," Daniel whispered to the empty hallway. "No, no, no." He stood at that window, looking down at the woman who'd saved his morning, watching her fall apart on the sidewalk outside his building, and made a decision. The board meeting could wait. Some things were more important. Daniel turned away from the conference room and headed for the elevator, purpose clear in every step. He was going to fix this. He was going to make this right. And if anyone had a problem with it, they could answer to him. Daniel Reeves moved through the hallways of Harlow Industries with a focus that made junior employees press themselves against walls to let him pass. His jaw was set, his expression dark. Anyone who'd worked for him long enough recognized that look. Someone was about to have a very difficult conversation. He bypassed the elevator and took the stairs down, needing the physical exertion to burn off the anger building in his chest. Not anger at Janet, never at Janet. Anger at himself. at the system, at the cold indifference that had turned away the one person who'd shown him genuine kindness. By the time he reached the ground floor, Daniel had his plan. He pushed through the stairwell door and strode directly toward the reception desk where Claire Morrison sat, perfectly composed, typing something on her computer. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes widened slightly. The CEO rarely used the main entrance or interacted with reception staff. "Mr. Reeves," she said, immediately professional. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you with something?" "Yes," Daniel said, his voice controlled but hard. "I need you to tell me about the 9 o'clock interview that was scheduled this morning. Administrative assistant position." Claire's professional mask flickered for just a moment. "Sir, the candidate arrived late. We turned her away per company policy. The panel has already moved on to—" "Her name," Daniel interrupted. "What was her name?" "Janet Price. And she was turned away because she was late." "Yes, sir. 22 minutes late. Policy clearly states—" "I know what the policy states." Daniel's voice was ice. "What I want to know is if she was given an opportunity to explain why she was late." Claire's composure cracked slightly. She mentioned something about helping someone with a broken-down car. "But sir, with all due respect, we can't make exceptions for every excuse. If we allowed tardiness—" "It wasn't an excuse," Daniel cut her off, his voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "It was the truth. I was the person whose car broke down. Miss Price stopped to help me. She used her phone battery to give me light to work on my engine. She gave me her scarf to protect my hands. She stood in the rain for 20 minutes, helping a complete stranger fix his car. That's why she was late, because she chose to help someone in need rather than prioritize her own advancement." The color drained from Claire's face. I didn't know that was you, sir." "Of course you didn't. And that's exactly the point." Daniel leaned forward, his hands on her desk. "Miss Price didn't know it was me either. She didn't stop to help the CEO of Harlow Industries. She stopped to help a stranded motorist, a stranger who meant nothing to her, someone who could do absolutely nothing for her in return. She made that choice knowing it would make her late for the most important interview of her life." Claire opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly not knowing what to say. "Where is she now?" Daniel demanded. I assume she left, sir." Marcus, the security guard, cleared his throat from his position near the entrance. "Mr. Reeves, sir. She's still outside. Been sitting on the pavement for about 15 minutes now." Daniel's chest tightened. 15 minutes. She'd been out there crying for 15 minutes while he'd been upstairs changing his suit. He turned and headed for the doors. Behind him, Claire called out, "Sir, the board meeting." "They can wait," Daniel said without turning around. "This is more important." He pushed through the glass doors into the rain. It had gotten heavier, the sky darker. And there, about 20 feet from the entrance, exactly where Marcus had said, was Janet. She was sitting on the wet pavement, her back against the building's stone facade, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her head was buried in her arms. Her shoulders shook with sobs. The carefully prepared folder sat beside her in a puddle, papers probably ruined. She was soaked through, her hair plastered to her head, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked completely defeated. Daniel's heart cracked. He removed his suit jacket as he approached, the rain immediately soaking his white dress shirt. He didn't care. He reached Janet and knelt down beside her on the wet pavement, his expensive pants absorbing water, and gently placed his jacket over her shaking shoulders. She looked up, startled. Confusion cut through the tears on her face. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. His face was just another blur in her devastation. Then her eyes focused. Recognition dawned slowly, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "You're," her voice was hoarse from crying, "you're the man from the road, with the broken car." "Yes," Daniel said gently. "And you're Janet Price, who missed her interview to help me. I don't understand." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing the mascara further. "How do you know my name? Why are you here?" Daniel settled onto the wet pavement beside her, uncaring about his ruined suit pants or the rain or anything except making sure she understood what he was about to tell her. "Because I'm Daniel Reeves," he said. "I own this building, and you were supposed to interview for a position in my company." Janet stared at him. The information didn't seem to process at first. Then her eyes went wide. You're the CEO of Harlow Industries? I am. The man whose car I helped fix was... She couldn't finish the sentence. The absurdity of it seemed to overwhelm her. Was me? Daniel confirmed. Yes. And I want you to know something, Janet. What happened to you this morning being turned away that was wrong, completely wrong, and I'm going to fix it. You don't have to do that. Pride crept into her voice despite the tears. I was late. They were right to. They were absolutely not right. Daniel's voice was firm. You were late because you chose to help someone. Because when dozens of cars drove past me, including a Mercedes, whose driver literally told me she was too busy to help, you stopped. You got off your bus. You crossed a highway. You sacrificed your phone battery and your time and your opportunity to help a stranger who could do nothing for you. He paused, making sure she was hearing him. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, Janet. Your character, your values, the kind of person you are when there's no benefit to being kind. That's exactly the kind of person I want in my company. That's exactly the kind of person I need on my team. But I don't want charity, Janet said, her voice breaking. I don't want a job because you feel sorry for me. This isn't charity, Daniel said firmly, and I don't feel sorry for you. I feel grateful to you, and more than that, I feel ashamed. Ashamed? Of myself, of my company, of the fact that while I was standing on that highway, person after person drove past me. Important people, wealthy people, people who could have helped easily but chose not to. And then you, someone on your way to an interview that would determine your family's future, you stopped. You chose compassion over convenience. That's not common, Janet. That's exceptional. He stood and held out his hand to her. So I'm not offering you charity. I'm recognizing excellence. And I'm asking if you'll let me correct the mistake my company made this morning, not by giving you the job you were interviewing for, but by offering you something better. Janet looked at his outstretched hand, at his face, rain running down it, completely serious, at the building behind him that represented opportunity and stability and everything she needed. I don't understand, she whispered. Then let me explain inside, where it's dry and warm and where I can make you a proper offer. Daniel's hand remained extended. Will you give me that chance? Janet hesitated. Every instinct told her this was too good to be true, that people like her didn't get second chances, especially not from billionaire CEOs, that she'd wake up and find this was all some desperate fantasy conjured by her exhausted, heartbroken mind. But Daniel's hand was real. The rain was real. The hope flickering in her chest was real. She placed her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. Daniel kept hold of her hand as they walked back toward the entrance. Marcus held the door open, a wide smile on his face. Claire stood behind her desk, her expression a mixture of shock and apprehension. Marcus, Daniel said as they entered, would you please retrieve Miss Price's folder from outside? I believe it's in a puddle. Right away, sir. Marcus moved quickly, clearly delighted by this turn of events. Daniel guided Janet past the reception desk. Claire opened her mouth as if to say something, then wisely closed it. Daniel paused and turned to her. Miss Morrison, please clear my schedule for the next hour and send a message to the board that I'll join their meeting when I'm finished with something more important. Yes, sir. Claire's voice was small. Daniel led Janet to the elevator. They stepped inside, and he pressed the button for the 28th floor. As the doors closed, cocooning them in chrome and silence, Janet finally found her voice. I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, Daniel said. And Janet? Thank you. For what? You're the one helping me now. For reminding me what matters. For showing me that success means nothing if it turns you into someone who drives past people who need help. He looked at her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd seen it. I've spent the last 10 years building this company, building wealth, building a reputation, and somewhere along the way, I forgot why I was doing it. I forgot the person I used to be, the person my mother raised me to be. The elevator dinged. 28th floor, executive level. The doors opened to reveal a reception area that was even more impressive than the lobby. Polished wood, leather furniture, original artwork on the walls, the kind of space that whispered money and power. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and professional bearing stood up from behind a desk. "Mr. Reeves, the board is waiting." "I know, Margaret. I need you to do something for me first." Daniel turned to Janet. "This is Margaret Santos, my executive assistant. Margaret, this is Janet Price. I need you to take her to the executive washroom, help her get dried off, and bring her to my office. Then I need you to call HR and have Maria meet us there in 20 minutes. "Of course, sir." If Margaret was surprised by any of this, she didn't show it. "Miss Price, please come with me." Daniel squeezed Janet's hand once before releasing it. "I'll see you in a few minutes. And Janet, don't worry, everything is going to be all right." Janet followed Margaret down a hallway, her mind spinning. The executive washroom was nicer than most people's living rooms. Margaret handed her thick, soft towels. "Take your time," Margaret said kindly. "There's a hairdryer in the cabinet, and I'll bring you some hot tea." "Thank you," Janet managed. Alone in the washroom, Janet stared at her reflection. Her makeup was destroyed. Her hair was a mess. Her suit was soaked and wrinkled. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd hit rock bottom and was being pulled back up by a hand she didn't understand. She dried off as best she could, fixed her hair into a neat bun again, and washed the mascara streaks from her face. Without makeup, she looked younger but more vulnerable, more herself. Margaret returned with tea in a real china cup and a warm smile. "Feeling better?" "A little, thank you." Janet sipped the tea. It was perfect, not too hot, slightly sweetened. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is he always like this?" "Like what?" "Kind, impulsive, willing to disrupt his entire day for a stranger." Margaret considered the question carefully. "Mr. Reeves is one of the best men I've ever worked for. He's demanding, yes. He has high standards. But he's also fair and fundamentally decent. However," she paused, "I've never seen him do anything quite like this. Whatever happened this morning must have affected him deeply. I just helped him fix his car. I suspect it was more than that." Margaret smiled. "Shall we? He's waiting for you." They walked back down the hallway to a large corner office. Through the glass walls, Janet could see Daniel inside, standing by the window, looking out at the city. He'd changed into yet another suit, this one navy blue. He looked every inch the powerful CEO now. Margaret knocked gently. "Mr. Reeves? Miss Price is here." Daniel turned. His expression softened when he saw Janet. "Thank you, Margaret. Please ask Maria to come up now." Margaret left, and Janet stood awkwardly in the doorway. Daniel gestured to the leather chairs facing his desk. "Please sit. You must be exhausted." Janet sat, the chair so comfortable she nearly sighed. Daniel settled into the chair beside her rather than behind his desk, a deliberate choice to eliminate the power dynamic. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Confused, overwhelmed, like I'm dreaming." "You're not dreaming. This is very real." He leaned forward. "Janet, I want to make you an offer. But before I do, I need you to understand something. This isn't about guilt or charity or anything transactional. This is about recognizing something rare and valuable when I see it. I'm listening. The position you were interviewing for was administrative assistant, entry level, good benefits, decent pay, room for growth. It's a solid job, and you would have been excellent at it." "Would have been?" "I'm not offering you that job," Daniel said. Janet's heart sank until he continued. "I'm offering you something better. Executive assistant. To me, specifically. Higher salary, significantly higher. Full executive benefits package including health insurance that covers pre-existing conditions, which I understand is important for your mother." Janet's breath caught. That's incredibly generous. But I'm not finished." Daniel smiled slightly. "You'd also receive a signing bonus to help with immediate expenses, moving costs if you need a better place to live, transportation stipend, professional development budget, everything my executive team receives." "Why?" The word burst out of Janet. "Why would you give me all of that? You don't know me. You don't know if I'm even qualified." "I know that when it cost you everything, you chose kindness," Daniel interrupted. "I know that you saw another human being struggling and responded with compassion. I know that you didn't ask for my name or my number or any way to leverage helping me into an advantage. You just helped and walked away." He stood and moved to the window, his back to her. "I've interviewed hundreds of people over the years, Janet. People with impressive degrees and stellar references and all the right credentials, and most of them would have driven past me this morning. They would have been too busy, too focused on their own success, too unwilling to risk being late for their own opportunities." He turned back to face her. "But you stopped. That tells me you have something that can't be taught and can't be faked. Integrity, empathy, the ability to see beyond yourself. Those are the qualities I value most, and they're the hardest to find. So yes, I'm offering you this position. And yes, I hope you'll take it. But not because I'm doing you a favor, because I genuinely believe you'll be exceptional at it." Before Janet could respond, Margaret knocked and opened the door. "Mr. Reeves, Maria Santos from HR is here. Send her in." A woman in her 40s entered, carrying a tablet and an air of professional efficiency. She looked between Daniel and Janet with curious but carefully neutral eyes. "Maria, this is Janet Price. I'd like to hire her as my executive assistant, effective immediately. Please process all the paperwork today. Full executive package." Maria's eyebrows rose slightly, the most emotion she allowed herself. "Of course, sir. Miss Price, I'll need some information from you." "Wait," Janet said, her voice trembling. She looked at Daniel. "I need to know something first. Anything. If I take this job, will people think I got it because of what happened this morning? Because I helped you?" "Probably," Daniel said honestly. "Will they respect me? Or will they think I'm just some charity case you felt sorry for? Some people will think that, yes." And Janet, "I can't control what people think, but I can control what I know to be true. You'll earn your position through your work, through your performance, through proving every single day that you deserve to be here. And if I can't, what if I'm not good enough? Then I'll tell you. I have high standards, I expect excellence, but I also believe in you. The question is, do you believe in yourself?" Janet looked at this man who'd gone from stranger to benefactor in the span of 3 hours, at the HR director, waiting patiently for her answer, at the corner office and the city view and the opportunity she'd thought was lost forever. She thought about her mother at home, rationing her medication because they couldn't afford the full doses, about the eviction notice on their kitchen counter, about 6 months of rejection and desperation, and she thought about standing in the rain, holding a phone flashlight for a stranger because it was the right thing to do. "Yes," Janet said, her voice stronger now. "I believe in myself, and I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired. I'll prove that I earned this. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." Daniel extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Janet stood and shook his hand. "Yes, we have an agreement." "Excellent." Daniel smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Welcome to Harlow Industries, Janet. Maria, please take care of everything, and make sure Janet receives an advance on her first paycheck. I imagine she has some immediate expenses." "Of course, sir." For the next hour, Janet sat with Maria, filling out paperwork, providing information, watching in disbelief as her life transformed on official documents. The salary Maria mentioned made Janet's head spin 3 times what she'd been making at the hospital. The benefits package was comprehensive. The signing bonus alone would cover 2 months of rent and her mother's medication for 3 months. "You'll start Monday," Maria said. "That gives you the weekend to get settled. Margaret will be your direct trainer for the first 2 weeks, then you'll transition to working independently with Mr. Reeves." "Monday," Janet repeated, dazed. "Is that acceptable? We could push it to the following week if you need more time." "No, Monday is perfect. More than perfect. Every day she delayed was another day of financial stress for her mother." Maria smiled. "I'll have everything finalized by end of day. The advance will be direct deposited into your account by tomorrow morning." "Thank you. Thank you so much." When the paperwork was complete, Margaret appeared to escort Janet out. Daniel had gone into his board meeting over an hour late, which Margaret said was unprecedented. "He really disrupted his entire day for you," Margaret said as they walked to the elevator. "The board meeting, the merger presentation, Everything. That's not like him. I still can't believe any of this is real. Believe it. And Janet? Margaret paused at the elevator. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve this. You do. I can tell. The elevator doors opened. Janet stepped inside, and as they closed, she caught one last glimpse of the executive floor, polished and perfect, and soon to be part of her daily reality. When she walked back through the lobby, Claire didn't make eye contact. Marcus gave her a discreet thumbs up and a warm smile. Janet pushed through the glass doors into afternoon light. The rain had stopped, and sun broke through the clouds in brilliant shafts. She stood on the same pavement where she'd been crying hours earlier, where she'd thought her life was over, where she'd been ready to give up completely. And now everything was different. Janet pulled out her dead phone, then laughed at herself. She'd have to find a payphone or borrow someone's phone to call her mother. She had so much to tell her. So much good news after so many months of bad. "Excuse me, miss." Janet turned. Marcus had come outside, holding something in his hands. "Your folder," he said, handing it to her. "Dried it off as best I could. Most of the papers survived." "Thank you." Janet took it, overwhelmed by this small kindness on top of everything else. "You did good in there," Marcus said quietly. "Stood up for yourself. Spoke your truth. That takes courage." I was terrified. "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do it anyway." He smiled. "Good luck, Miss Price. Something tells me you're going to do just fine." Janet made her way to a coffee shop 2 blocks away and asked to borrow their phone. With shaking fingers, she dialed her mother's number. Agnes answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mom." Janet's voice broke. "Mom, you were right. Baby, what happened? Did you get the job?" "Better than that, Mom. So much better than that. I'm coming home, and I'll tell you everything. But Mom, we're going to be okay. We're really going to be okay." Agnes started crying on the other end of the line. Happy tears, relief tears, the kind of tears that came when impossible prayers were answered. "I told you," Agnes said through her tears. "I told you today would change everything. You did. You were right. About everything." After she hung up, Janet stood outside the coffee shop, her face turned up to the sun that had broken through the clouds, and felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Hope. Real, solid, undeniable hope. She'd stopped to help a stranger. That choice had cost her one opportunity, but had earned her something better. Not just a job or financial security, but a reminder that doing the right thing even when it costs you, especially when it costs you, that mattered. Character mattered. Compassion mattered. And sometimes, when you least expected it, the universe rewarded you for choosing kindness over convenience. Janet started walking toward the bus stop, her ruined folder tucked under her arm, her heart lighter than it had been in months, ready to go home and tell her mother about the day a broken-down car had led to a miracle. Behind her, 28 floors up, Daniel Reeves stood at his office window watching her walk away. He'd finally made it to the board meeting, apologized for his lateness, and delivered his merger presentation flawlessly, despite his mind being elsewhere. The board had approved the merger. The deal was done. Harlow Industries would expand internationally within the year. It was one of the biggest successes of Daniel's career. But all he could think about was Janet, about her kindness, about the way she'd held that phone flashlight steady while her battery died, about her dignity even when she'd been sitting on the pavement crying, about her strength when she'd said, "I believe in myself." Margaret appeared beside him. "The board is very pleased with the merger terms, sir." "Good. And may I say, I think you made an excellent choice with Miss Price." Daniel turned to look at his longtime assistant. "You've only met her for an hour." "Sometimes an hour is enough," Margaret smiled. "I've worked for you for 8 years, Mr. Reeves. I've seen you hire dozens of people. You've never done anything like this, rearranging your day, skipping a board meeting, personally intervening in a hiring decision. She must have made quite an impression." "She reminded me who I'm supposed to be," Daniel said quietly. "Then she's exactly who you need around you." Margaret headed toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, sir, I think this morning helping her, hiring her, I think it's the most important thing you've done since starting this company." After she left, Daniel remained at the window. The city spread out before him, millions of people going about their lives, most of them strangers to each other, most of them too busy to notice when someone needed help, but some people stopped. Some people, like Janet, chose compassion over convenience. And maybe, Daniel thought, those were the people worth building a life around. Those were the people who reminded you what success was actually for. He had built an empire, but it had taken a woman sitting in the rain to show him what that empire should mean. Daniel turned away from the window and headed back to his desk. He had work to do, a company to run, a new employee to prepare for, and for the first time in years, he was excited about something beyond quarterly earnings and merger deals. He was excited about what Monday would bring when Janet walked through those doors as part of his team, about what she'd bring to his company, about what she might bring to his life. The day had started with a breakdown on the highway. It was ending with something that felt like a beginning, and Daniel Reeves, who'd spent a decade building walls to protect himself from connection, found himself hoping that those walls might finally be coming down. Janet stood outside Harlow Industries at 7:45 Monday morning, 15 minutes earlier than necessary, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 days had passed since that rain-soaked morning that changed everything. 3 days of telling her mother the full story while Agnes cried happy tears. 3 days of the advance deposit hitting her account enough to pay the overdue rent, buy her mother's full medication supply, and purchase 2 new professional outfits that actually fit. 3 days of wondering if this was all real or if she'd show up Monday morning to find it had been some elaborate mistake. But here she was, new navy suit, hair professionally styled, a leather portfolio she'd splurged on because she needed to look like she belonged in that executive suite. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. Then she walked through those glass doors. Claire looked up from the reception desk. Their eyes met briefly before Claire looked away, her cheeks coloring slightly. Marcus, however, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Miss Price. Congratulations on your new position." "Thank you, Marcus." Janet smiled back, grateful for his kindness. The elevator ride to the 28th floor felt both too long and too short. When the doors opened, Margaret was already waiting, coffee in hand and a welcoming smile on her face. "Janet, right on time, actually early. That's a good sign." Margaret handed her the coffee. "2 creams, 1 sugar. That's how you took your tea last week, so I made an educated guess. It's perfect, thank you. Let me show you to your office." Office. Janet had an office. The reality of it hit her as Margaret led her down the hallway to a space directly adjacent to Daniel's corner office. It was smaller but still impressive. Glass walls, a proper desk, ergonomic chair, computer setup that looked brand new. "This is yours," Margaret said. "I've already loaded the essential software and set up your email. Your login credentials are in this envelope." She handed Janet a folder. "We'll spend this morning going over Mr. Reeves's schedule, preferences, systems. He has a conference call at 9, meetings throughout the day. Your job will be to keep everything running smoothly." "I understand. I know this is overwhelming, but you'll catch on quickly. And Janet?" Margaret's expression softened. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here. You earned this position. Now prove it through your work." For the next 2 hours, Margaret walked Janet through everything: Daniel's calendar system, his communication preferences, the various executives she'd interact with, the board members' names and quirks, the rhythm of the executive floor. Janet absorbed it all, taking meticulous notes, asking clarifying questions, her mind working overtime to memorize every detail. She'd meant what she told Daniel: she would work harder than anyone. She would prove she deserved this. At 8:55, Daniel arrived. He moved through the executive suite with purposeful energy, nodding to various employees, then stopped when he saw Janet in her new office. "Good morning," he said, and his smile was genuine. "How's your first day starting?" "Overwhelming but good," Janet admitted. "Margaret has been incredibly helpful. She's the best. I'm glad she's training you." He glanced at his watch. "I have a call in 5 minutes, but afterward, let's touch base. Margaret can bring you up to speed on what I need for this afternoon's board presentation." "Of course, Mr. Reeves." "Daniel," he corrected gently. "When it's just us or in informal settings, Daniel is fine." "Daniel," Janet repeated. the name feeling strange on her tongue in this context. He disappeared into his office, and Janet turned back to Margaret, who was watching with an unreadable expression. "He doesn't usually invite people to use his first name," Margaret observed. "You really did make an impression." The morning flew by in a blur of activity. Janet sat in on the conference call, taking notes, learning the players and the dynamics. She reviewed the board presentation materials, asking Margaret questions about what various data points meant. She fielded phone calls, learning to screen them according to Daniel's preferences. By lunch, her head was spinning with information, but she was managing. More than managing, she was keeping up. Margaret ordered lunch for them both, and they ate in Janet's office while continuing the training. "You're doing well," Margaret said, genuine approval in her voice. "Better than most executive assistants on their first day." "I can't afford to do anything less than well," Janet said honestly. "Because of the circumstances of your hiring?" "Partly, but also because—" Janet hesitated, then decided honesty was the best policy. "Because my mother depends on me. Because 6 months of unemployment taught me not to take opportunities for granted. Because I know how lucky I am to be here." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Margaret said firmly. "Character did. Remember that." That afternoon, Janet experienced her first real test. One of the board members, Robert Hutchinson, called demanding to speak with Daniel immediately. Daniel was in a meeting with the engineering team. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hutchinson, but Mr. Reeves is in a meeting that can't be interrupted," Janet said professionally. "Can I take a message or schedule a callback?" "Who is this?" Hutchinson's tone was imperious, used to getting his way. "This is Janet Price, Mr. Reeves's new executive assistant." "New? What happened to Margaret?" "Margaret is transitioning to a different role. I'm her replacement." "Well, Miss Price, I don't care if Daniel is in a meeting. I'm a board member. You interrupt that meeting and put him on the phone, now." Janet's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "Mr. Hutchinson, with respect, Mr. Reeves gave me explicit instructions about which meetings can be interrupted and which cannot. The engineering review is on the cannot list. However, he's scheduled to finish in 20 minutes. I can have him call you at 3:15, or I can schedule a longer conversation for tomorrow morning. Which would you prefer?" Silence. Then, grudgingly, 3:15 is acceptable? Excellent. I'll make sure he calls you then." After she hung up, Janet's hands were shaking. Margaret appeared in her doorway, having overheard from her nearby office. "That was perfectly handled," Margaret said. "Hutchinson tries to bully every new assistant. You stood your ground without being disrespectful. Well done." At 3:15 exactly, Janet reminded Daniel about the callback. He made the call, and when he finished 15 minutes later, he came to Janet's office. Hutchinson said, "You handled him well," Daniel said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "He's not easy to manage. I just followed your protocols. Many people would have caved to a board member's demands. You didn't. That's good instinct." He paused. "How are you feeling? Honestly?" "Overwhelmed, nervous, but also—" Janet smiled slightly. "Also, like I can do this." "You can, and you are." Daniel glanced at his watch. "I have 2 more meetings, then we're done for the day. Go home at 5:30. Don't stay late trying to prove something on your first day." "But—" "Janet, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Pace yourself." She did as he suggested, leaving at 5:30 sharp. On the bus ride home, though, soon she'd be able to afford a car. Janet reflected on her first day. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd handled it. At home, Agnes was waiting with dinner already made, despite her limited mobility. "Tell me everything," Agnes demanded. Janet did. Every detail, every challenge, every small victory. And when she finished, Agnes took her hand. "I'm so proud of you, baby. Your father would be too." Janet's throat tightened at the mention of her father, gone 10 years now. "I wish he could see this." He can, and he's smiling. 4 weeks passed in a blur of early mornings and late nights. Janet threw herself into the job with single-minded determination. She arrived before Daniel every morning. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them. She streamlined his calendar, improved his filing systems, handled difficult personalities with diplomatic grace. the other executives noticed. At the monthly leadership meeting, the CFO, Patricia Chen, pulled Janet aside. "You're doing excellent work," Patricia said. "Daniel seems more organized, more efficient. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." But not everyone was supportive. In the break room one afternoon, Janet overheard two junior employees talking. "Did you hear how she got the job?" one said. "Helped him fix his car and suddenly she's his executive assistant. Please, I heard she was applying for the admin position. Completely different level. How does that make sense, unless there's something else going on?" Janet's face burned. She grabbed her coffee and left without acknowledging she'd heard, but the words stung, because wasn't there some truth to them? She had been applying for a lower position. She had been promoted beyond her interview level. That evening, Daniel noticed her distraction. "You've been quiet today," he observed as they reviewed the next week's schedule. "Everything all right?" "Just tired," Janet lied. "Janet," his tone said he knew better. "What's wrong?" She debated, deflecting again, then decided against it. If they were going to work together, honesty mattered. "I overheard some employees talking about how I got this job, implying that there's something inappropriate about it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Who?" "It doesn't matter. They're not wrong to question it. I was interviewing for a different position. It does look suspicious. It looks like I recognized exceptional character and made a smart hiring decision. To you, maybe. To them, it looks like favoritism, or worse." Daniel stood and moved to the window, his thinking position. After a long moment, he turned back. "I can't control what people think or say. Neither can you. What I can control is making sure you have every opportunity to prove yourself through your work. And Janet, you've been proving yourself every single day for the past month. Your performance has been exemplary. But the optics will change when people see that you're not just competent, but exceptional. That you're not riding on some perceived favoritism, but earning your place every day through excellence." He paused. "Unless you're having doubts about whether you can do this job?" "No," Janet said firmly. "I know I can do this job. I am doing this job. Then that's all that matters. The rest is just noise." But the noise didn't stop. If anything, it got louder when Daniel invited Janet to attend the company's annual gala in December. "It's part of your role," he explained. "My executive assistant always attends to help coordinate, make sure the evening runs smoothly." "Margaret always attended?" Janet verified. "Every year. There's nothing unusual about this, except it felt unusual when Janet walked into the ballroom at the Riverside Hotel, wearing a dress she'd carefully chosen, professional but elegant, bought with her first full paycheck. The room was filled with executives, board members, major clients, and their spouses. Crystal chandeliers, string quartet, champagne flowing freely. Janet felt completely out of place despite belonging professionally. Daniel found her near the entrance, looking uncomfortable. He was in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her monthly rent, perfectly at ease in this world of wealth and power. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you. You look very CEO-like." He laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." For the first hour, Janet worked. She checked on catering, resolved a seating mix-up, ensured the AV equipment was set up correctly for Daniel's welcome speech. She was professional, efficient, nearly invisible. Then Catherine Whitmore, wife of board member James Whitmore, cornered her near the bar. "You must be the new assistant," Catherine said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Janet, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am. Janet Price." "How fortunate for you to have been in the right place at the right time, with a broken-down car." The implication was clear in Catherine's tone. Janet kept her expression neutral. "I was actually on my way to a job interview when I stopped to help Mr. Reeves. It made me miss that interview entirely, but landed you a much better position. How serendipitous." "I'd call it consequential," Janet corrected gently. "Actions have consequences, sometimes good ones." Catherine's eyes narrowed, recognizing she wasn't going to rattle this woman. "Well, welcome to Harlow Industries. I'm sure you'll find it educational." She drifted away, and Janet exhaled slowly. Her hands were shaking. She set down her champagne glass, she'd barely touched it anyway, and headed for the restroom to collect herself. She was washing her hands when she heard the door open. Two women entered, talking animatedly. Janet recognized one voice, Amanda from marketing. "Did you see her dress? Trying way too hard to fit in. Please. Everyone knows she only got the job because she conveniently helped Daniel with his car. Who even does that? Stop on a highway for a stranger. Someone angling for a job, apparently. And it worked." Janet stared at her reflection in the mirror. She could confront them, could walk out of this stall and make them face her, could defend herself, or she could take the high road. Again. She waited until they left, then emerged and splashed cold water on her face. The door opened again. This time, it was Daniel. "This is the women's restroom," Janet said, surprised. "I know, and I don't care." He locked the door behind him. "I overheard Amanda and Claire in the hallway. What they were saying about you. It's fine. It's not fine. It's disrespectful and it's wrong, and I won't tolerate it. Daniel, you can't control what people think." "No, but I can control what they say in my company, about my employees, at my event." He stepped closer, his expression intense. "Janet, I need you to understand something. What happened that morning on the highway? That wasn't luck or chance or opportunism. That was character, your character. And every day since, you've proven that character is matched by competence and intelligence and dedication." "They're not completely wrong," Janet said quietly. "I did get an opportunity because I helped you. I did benefit from that encounter. And you've earned your place here every day since. That's what matters." Janet looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Something beyond professional respect. Something warmer, deeper. "Why does this matter so much to you?" she asked. "Why do you care what people say about me?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with something internal. Then, "Because you reminded me what matters. Because in the 6 weeks since you started working here, everything has been better, clearer, more meaningful." He paused. "And because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about work for me." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. "Daniel, I know this is complicated. You work for me. There's a power dynamic. This is completely inappropriate for me to say." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling its perfect styling. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it, that I don't look forward to seeing you every morning, that I don't make excuses to stop by your office, that I don't think about you when I'm not at work." Janet's heart was racing. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just needed to be honest, because pretending is becoming impossible." He moved toward the door. "I should go. Before I make this worse." "Wait," Janet's voice stopped him. "You're not the only one who's been pretending." He turned back slowly. "What?" "I've felt it too, for weeks now. The way you look at me sometimes, the way I look for excuses to ask you questions that I already know the answers to, the way my heart jumps when you say my name." She took a shaky breath. "But this terrifies me, Daniel, because what if it ruins everything? What if people find out and they say, I slept my way into this job? What if it costs me the career I've barely started building? Then we'll be careful. We'll be smart about this." "How? How do we be smart about the CEO and his assistant developing feelings for each other? That's the oldest cliché in the corporate handbook." Daniel moved closer, his voice low and intense. "By being honest, by setting boundaries, by making sure your professional reputation is protected." He paused. "And by doing something I should have done weeks ago." "What?" "Promoting you out of my direct supervision." Janet blinked. "What?" "There's a position opening up. Head of operations. It's a promotion, more responsibility, more pay, your own team. You'd still be in the executive suite, we'd still work closely together, but you wouldn't report directly to me. It removes the power dynamic." "You want to promote me again? After 2 months?" "I want to create a situation where what's happening between us can be explored without compromising your professional integrity." His eyes searched hers. "If that's what you want, if you feel the same way I do." "And if I don't?" Janet asked, though her racing heart betrayed the question as rhetorical. "Then I'll push these feelings down, maintain our professional relationship, and be grateful to have you on my team in any capacity." Janet looked at him, this man who'd gone from stranger to employer to something infinitely more complicated in the span of 8 weeks. This man who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen to lift her up. This man who was now offering to restructure her entire career to protect her reputation while giving them a chance to explore something neither of them had planned for. The head of operations position, she said slowly. Would I actually be qualified for it? Or would this be another case of people thinking I got it for the wrong reasons? You'd be qualified. Margaret has been telling me for weeks that you're ready for more responsibility. Patricia Chen specifically asked if you might be interested in a leadership role. Your work speaks for itself, Janet. But the timing looks suspicious. The timing is actually perfect. We've needed someone in that role for 3 months. I've been too busy to properly vet candidates. You've been exceeding expectations in every task I give you. It's a logical progression. He paused. But I won't push you. This is your career, your choice. If you'd rather stay as my executive assistant, we maintain professional boundaries, and nothing changes. That's completely valid. Janet thought about her mother's words. Take the risk, baby. You've been playing it safe your whole life. Where has that gotten you? She thought about the woman who'd stopped on a rainy highway to help a stranger, knowing it might cost her everything. That woman had been brave. That woman had taken a risk. Maybe it was time to be that woman again. I'll take the promotion, Janet said, on one condition. Name it. We take this slowly. We're discreet. We don't let anyone have ammunition to say my career progression is about our relationship rather than my work. I've worked too hard to have my reputation destroyed. Agreed. Completely agreed. And if this doesn't work, if we realize we've made a mistake, we stay professional. We don't let it affect the working relationship or the company. Also agreed. Then yes, to the promotion and to seeing where this goes. Daniel's expression transformed relief and joy and something deeper, all mixing together. I should kiss you right now. We're in a bathroom at your company gala. You absolutely should not. I know. Doesn't stop me from wanting to. He smiled, genuine and warm. Monday. We'll announce your promotion Monday. And then we'll figure out the rest. Monday, Janet agreed. They emerged from the bathroom separately, Janet first, then Daniel 5 minutes later. No one seemed to notice anything unusual. Janet returned to her coordination duties, and Daniel delivered his welcome speech with his usual commanding presence. But everything had changed. They both felt it. When Daniel's speech ended with a toast to the company's success and the people who made it possible, his eyes found Janet's across the crowded room. She lifted her glass slightly, a private acknowledgement that only he would understand. They were taking a risk, stepping into something complicated and potentially messy. But then again, the best things in life usually started that way. After all, they'd met on the side of a highway in the rain, with a broken-down car and a missed interview. Nothing about their story had ever been simple or conventional. Why should this be any different? Janet settled into the head of operations role with the same dedication she'd brought to every position. She built her team, streamlined processes, improved efficiency metrics. Within 6 weeks, productivity in her department increased by 18%. The whispers didn't stop immediately. People still speculated. But as weeks turned into months and Janet's work continued to speak for itself, the narrative shifted, slowly, grudgingly. But it shifted. Price really knows her stuff, Janet overheard one executive telling another. Best hire Reeves has made in years. She and Daniel were careful, discreet. No public displays, no obvious favoritism. At work, they maintained professional boundaries. But after hours, they were exploring something neither had expected to find. Dinner at quiet restaurants where no one from the company would see them. Long conversations that stretched past midnight. Discovering that beneath the CEO and the operations director were 2 people who'd both grown up struggling, who both knew what it meant to fight for every opportunity, who both understood sacrifice and determination and the weight of responsibility. Daniel met Agnes officially one Sunday afternoon, bringing groceries and fixing the loose cabinet door in their new apartment, a much better place that Janet could now afford. Agnes watched him work and smiled at her daughter with knowing eyes. "That man loves you," Agnes whispered while Daniel was distracted with the cabinet. I can see it in how he looks at you. Mom, we're taking things slow. Slow is fine. Just don't be so slow that you miss what's right in front of you. But there was something else growing between Janet and Daniel beyond romance, a shared vision. It started with a conversation on a rainy Tuesday evening, 6 months after that first highway breakdown. They were in Daniel's penthouse, reviewing quarterly reports, when Janet paused. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? About how I reminded you of your mother? I do. Tell me about her, about growing up the way you did. Daniel set down his tablet and talked, really talked, about poverty, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion, about the fear and humiliation of not having enough, about the promise he'd made to himself to ensure she'd never struggle again. When he finished, Janet said quietly, "My dad died when I was 22. Brain aneurysm, no warning. One day he was fine, the next day he was gone. We didn't have life insurance. Mom didn't have job skills beyond cleaning houses. I was in college on scholarship, trying to finish my degree while working 2 jobs to help with bills. I didn't know. Most people don't. We don't advertise our struggles." She met his eyes. "But we both know what it's like to be the person who needs help, to be desperate and scared, and one crisis away from complete disaster. Yes. So what if we did something about it? What if we used your resources, our resources, to help people like we were?" Daniel leaned forward. "What are you thinking? A foundation, supporting families in crisis, medical emergencies, job loss, unexpected disasters, the kind of situations where people need help fast, before they fall completely through the cracks, where a few $1,000s or connection to resources could mean the difference between disaster and recovery. Like if someone had helped my mother when my father left, or helped your family when your father died." "Exactly." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, "I've been so focused on building wealth, on creating security for myself and my mother. But you're right. What's the point of all this success if we're not using it to help people who are where we used to be? It would be complicated to set up. We'd need proper structure, vetting processes, oversight. I don't care how complicated it is. This is exactly what we should be doing." They worked through the night, sketching out initial plans. By dawn, they had the framework for the Harlow Hope Foundation, focused on emergency family assistance, medical crisis support, and employment transition help. 2 months later, at the company's quarterly town hall, Daniel announced the foundation's launch. He talked about growing up poor, about his mother's struggles, about understanding what it meant to need help. And then he introduced Janet as the foundation's co-director. "Miss Price understands these struggles personally," Daniel said. "She understands what it means to face impossible choices and desperate circumstances. Her vision and leadership will ensure this foundation actually helps the people who need it most." The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. Even the people who'd questioned Janet's rise couldn't argue with this. She wasn't just succeeding professionally, she was using her position to help others. After the presentation, Patricia Chen pulled Janet aside. "This is remarkable. Truly. The company needed this. You and Daniel make a good team. Thank you. And Janet, I owe you an apology. When you first started, I was skeptical. I thought what many people thought. But I was wrong. You've earned your place here 10 times over." That evening, Janet and Daniel stood in his office, looking out at the city lights. "We did it," Janet said softly. "We're actually going to help people. We are, because of you. Because you reminded me that success isn't just about what you build, but about what you do with it once you've built it." Janet turned to face him. "Can I tell you something? That morning on the highway, when I decided to stop to help you, that was one of the hardest choices I've ever made. I was so scared of missing my interview, so desperate, but I couldn't drive past you. I'm glad you didn't. Me too, because that choice, that single moment of choosing compassion over convenience, that changed everything, for both of us." Daniel pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting on wet pavement outside this building, crying because she thought her life was over. Now she was standing in the CEO's office, building a foundation that would help thousands of families, wrapped in the arms of a man who saw her value when she'd thought she had nothing to offer. "I love you," Daniel said quietly. "I've been waiting for the right moment to say it, and I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect moment, so I'm just saying it now. I love you, Janet Price." Janet looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes, happy tears this time. "I love you too. I think I have for months. I was just too scared to admit it." "Scared of what?" "That it was too good to be true, that something would go wrong, that I'd wake up and find out this was all a dream. It's real, we're real, and I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time since her father died, since her mother got sick, since she lost her job and spent 6 months drowning in rejection and desperation, Janet felt completely safe. Not because all her problems were solved, not because life would suddenly be easy, but because she'd found someone who understood her, valued her, loved her for exactly who she was. Someone who'd seen her at her worst and chose to build her up rather than tear her down. Someone who'd transformed a missed opportunity into something better than she'd ever imagined. The rain fell in steady sheets as Janet and Daniel drove down the highway, their daughter Hope, 3 months old, sleeping peacefully in her car seat in the back. They'd gotten married 6 months ago in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Agnes had cried through the entire thing. Eleanor had welcomed Janet like the daughter she'd never had. And Marcus, promoted to head of security at Harlow Industries, had given Janet away when she walked down the aisle. Now they were heading home from visiting Agnes, who was thriving with her medical needs fully covered, and her daughter finally stable and happy. "Traffic's getting bad," Daniel observed, slowing down. "We have time. We're not in a rush." That's when they saw him, a man on the side of the road, hood up on his car, rain pouring down, looking frustrated and alone. Car after car sped past him without stopping. Janet and Daniel looked at each other. No words needed. Daniel put on his hazard lights and pulled over onto the shoulder. "Stay with Hope," he said. "I'll go help." "We'll both go." Janet unbuckled her seatbelt. "We'll take turns holding the umbrella." They got out together, leaving Hope safely asleep, and approached the stranded motorist, a young man who looked exhausted and stressed. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need help?" Janet called out. The man looked up, surprise evident on his face. "My car died. I've been trying to flag someone down for 20 minutes. Let's see what we can do," Daniel said, already moving toward the hood. Janet held the umbrella, just like she had a year ago. Daniel examined the engine, just like he'd been examined a year ago. Together, they worked to help someone they didn't know, expecting nothing in return. Because that's what you did. When you saw someone struggling, you stopped, even when it was inconvenient, especially when it was inconvenient. That's what made you human. After 15 minutes, they got the car running. The young man was overwhelmingly grateful. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." "We've been where you are," Janet said kindly. "Sometimes we all need help." As they walked back to their car, Daniel put his arm around Janet's waist. Hope was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to her parents' act of kindness. "She'll learn," Daniel said, looking at their daughter. "She'll learn that success means nothing if you become someone who drives past people who need help." "She'll learn by watching us," Janet agreed. They pulled back onto the highway, and Janet thought about that morning a year ago, how she'd almost driven past, how stopping to help had cost her one opportunity but earned her something infinitely better. A career she loved, a man who cherished her, a child they were raising with the values that mattered, a foundation helping thousands of families avoid the desperation she'd once felt, a life she couldn't have imagined when she was sitting on that wet pavement crying. All because she'd made one choice: to stop, to help, to choose compassion over convenience. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Daniel asked, as if reading her thoughts. "All the time." "Do you regret it? Even for a moment?" Janet looked at him, this man who'd gone from stranger to benefactor to partner to husband. She looked back at Hope, their daughter, proof that good things could come from impossible situations. She thought about Agnes, healthy and happy, about the foundation helping people just like them, about all the broken things that had somehow become beautiful. Thanks for listening to this amazing story. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a nice comment. Until next time.